What's going on, Fintellects? It's your boy, the Fiscal Intellect here. Today, we're going to be reviewing Law and Crime and their review of the Karmelo Anthony Murder Trial. This time, it's the defense to, point out their case as far as evidence and witnesses and things of that nature. So this is going to be a short synopsis of the trial. Be ready for it. That's all I gotta say. But let me go ahead and share the video. Let's get to it. But before we get to it, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and drop a subscribe. We need more Fintellects like you to join the home team. And also, don't forget to like and comment on this video as it helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts. All right, let's get to it.
A major twist in the Karmelo Anthony murder trial. The jury will soon decide the fate of the former track athlete accused of fatally stabbing a fellow competitor at a Texas track meet. Was it murder or self-defense? We're inside the courtroom with details on the defense's final witness and the unexpected moment that unfolded just before the defense rested its case. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
Pretty great people.
Will not give us his side of the story from the witness stand. We did wonder if the defendant, who is facing a charge of first-degree murder, would testify at his own murder trial, and today we learned that is not going to happen. The defense just rested after calling 6 witnesses over the course of 2 days. Now, the state had called 21 witnesses when they presented their case. Tomorrow, both sides will deliver their closing arguments, and then it will be up to the jury to decide the verdict in one of the most high-profile and emotionally charged trials that we have seen this year. Joining us now, just was inside the courtroom, now outside to talk with us, Cody Thomas of Court TV. Thanks for sticking with us again on this one. Take us inside the moment that the defense rested in this case.
Yeah, Chris, so they called 3 witnesses during the Saturday session. They did do court on the weekend 2 days ago. 3 witnesses then, they came in today, did 3 witnesses this morning, and then of course we go on our lunch break. Just a regular old hour and 15-minute lunch break. I pop out here, do some television, go back in. And, mind you, Chris, we've talked about this. This judge has been very prompt. We're supposed to be back in at 12:30 p.m. local time, central time here in McKinney, Texas. So we get back in there, 12:35. All right, 10 minutes, 15 minutes go by, and all right, half an hour goes by. Long story short, Chris, we end up waiting for an hour and 45 minutes before something happens. And as we're sitting there, the only people we see go inside this courtroom are the Anthony family, his parents. And so, of course, the speculation starts running. Are they negotiating a plea deal? Is he going to testify? What are we waiting for? Because this is abnormal. This judge has been very prompt, has been very on time, and very, a stickler about being inside the courtroom when he says to be inside. And so we get back in there. We're, awaiting this big imminent moment, what it might be. And then the defense says they're resting. No colloquy, no asking if he's going to testify and him responding or anything like that. We didn't hear him speak. But the defense is now rested, the state not putting on a rebuttal, the state rests. So that's where we're at now, Chris. And then the jury will have the case tomorrow, of course, following closing arguments and the jury instruction. And then they'll get the case and start deliberating. And the judge also pointed out that they will be sequestered, meaning they will not be able to go home for the duration of this deliberation period. They'll deliberate as late as 10 or 11 p.m., the judge said. And then if they decide to call it quits, they go back to a hotel, to which the hotel's televisions and phones have been removed out, so they can't have access to news stories and things like this. So it'll be a very interesting thing, Chris, but it was definitely a surprising moment that they rested pretty early. We expected this trial to go through Friday or Saturday, which it still could. We don't know how long those deliberations could be, but here we are on Monday, just the 4th day of testimony, and both sides have already rested.
Yeah, I think it was roughly 21 witnesses for the prosecution, and it was over like 2.5 days that they presented their case. And then you have a total of 6 witnesses for the defense. They started to present their side of the story on Saturday in the afternoon. And then here we are. I mean, we're recording this just before 3 o'clock Central Time, and they're done. What stood out to you today? I know they called a couple of track athletes to the stand as well as a police officer. Walk us through kind of these final witnesses and what they mean for the defense in this case.
Yeah, again, 3 witnesses here, Chris. The police officer was really short. It was only 10 or 15 minutes. And the point that he pretty much made is that it is not illegal to carry a 5.5 or below a 5.5 inch blade knife into a stadium. While it might be, against school policy, it's not criminally illegal. The blade has to be less than 5.5 inches, though. So he pointed that out, and that was pretty much the crux of his testimony. But one of the witnesses today, Chris, one of those athletes who was there, was testifying, of course, about the rain. Everything we've heard about this rain, and as part of the defense narrative as to why Karmelo was under that tent, trying to get out of the rain, which, makes sense. He talked about when the rain started, him, Karmelo, and like 2 or 3 other students went to the dugout, a baseball dugout that's right behind the stadium, to get out of the rain. He said they were only there for a few minutes before a coach came and told them they couldn't hang out there. And then as they were walking back from the dugout, this student says that his coach, he was on the 4x1 relay, told them to start warming up. And so they all go there, him, Karmelo, and everybody else go down to the field to start warming up. And he says, they're doing their thing, stretching out, running up and down the tracks, just warming their legs up and everything. And then he says he sees Karmelo go up into the stands. And, him and Karmelo, he knows him. He's known him for a while. That's, his friend on the track team, a teammate. And then he says he's out there warming up, and he starts hearing some sort of commotion under the memorial tent. And so he says, he's not quite sure what was going on. Was it, people that knew each other horsing around? Was it, a fight about to break out?
Honestly, is that a credible witness? Because you're not really there at the scene. You just kind of heard something. So you're going based off what you thought might have happened rather than what you've actually visibly seen with your own 2 eyes. So I don't know. It might not be a credible
He just
witness.
wasn't sure, but it was loud enough and enough commotion to be concerned. And then he eventually saw Karmelo, and he described it as, sort of being kind of surrounded in his initial police report, as a police interrogation, the answers he gave police once this happened. He described it as Karmelo as being surrounded. So he walks us through how he was walking towards the bleachers from the grass, about the 40-yard line he said he was on, towards the bleachers, just to see what was going on. He's turning back to see if his teammates are realizing what's going on. And then he sees, a bunch of students scatter. That was his testimony. And that was, of course, the moment that the stabbing happened. Now, under cross-examination, the prosecutor hopped up and showed that surveillance video yet again. And he kind of challenged what the kid was saying. The surveillance video had all kinds of angles. We have the angle on what happened, and then we have the angle that we actually saw of where this kid was on the field warming up. And they're playing the video, and it gets to the point, and the prosecutor literally goes, boom, this is the stabbing right here, and then he paused it. And then it shows the kid and another collection of runners not walking towards the stadium. So pretty much challenging what the kid had said. And then he talked about how he had interviewed the kid, weeks before pre-trial. And he said when he showed him that video, the kid agrees that, some of his accounts didn't line up. Some of them were just plain wrong. And the kid agreed to that on the stand. So that was very interesting.
I honestly think this defense is throwing it as well too. I mean, the prosecution team also, some things that they're bringing to the table, but the defense is just throwing this case.
Direct, the defense comes back and says, well, if I told you that, the timestamps of these 2 angles of the video didn't match up, you would have, no idea of that. The kid obviously, agreed to that. He's like, I don't know about the timestamps, but that came up earlier in the trial because
if you ever get out, or if you do get, incarcerated, I want you to watch Friday. I want you to watch Friday. When Craig tried getting the blick, his dad said, nah, man, he got a brick, and use hands. Just use hands.
They said the sinks were off a few seconds, so that's something that the jury's going to have to weigh here, Chris. But, that was the most powerful moment to me today, as far as this student testifying his account, the prosecutor, challenging that account, but then the defense coming back and being like, well, this might be a couple of seconds off anyway.
Yeah, and you go back to that video because it's surveillance video, right, from kind of perched up on the top of the stands of this football stadium. I know you've seen it. It hasn't been released to the public. And it like at the time that it was presented, which I think was on the first day of this trial by the state, like we were talking about it not being the most compelling video because you don't really see a lot. But here we are so many days later, and that is something that for someone who could be a very important witness to the defense, prosecutors were able to pull that video up once again that the jury's already familiar with and actually point this witness out and say, and they're arguing that he actually maybe didn't see things the way that he thought he did.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And to
your point,
fast,
Chris,
right?
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the video. It looks very grainy, like a gas station video because it's very wide angle. And when you zoom in, you're going to lose quality. You can kind of make out what's going on, but it still is not the best quality video to be presenting. But at the same time, there are identifiable characters that the prosecution has made very known that they have talked about this weeks before this trial. So they've walked through, this student understood, and not only this student, but other students as well, have walked through the key players. And then we have the forensic video analyst on the first day that, had the different characters spotlighted in the video. So they made sense of what was really going on. But yeah, you would imagine, Chris, it seems like the prosecution had a better relationship with one of the defense's witnesses. So it's a very interesting thing to see play out and then have the defense case end this abruptly.
Yeah, and now they head into closing arguments, and you kind of step back and you think, like, what is the defense of this case? And like one of the questions that we've talked about, and it's come up a lot, is like, why does he have a knife at a track meet? And it seems like just based off this police officer, and I believe the blade was 5.5 inches or more, then that would be a weapon you're not allowed to have. The blade in this situation, I think, was 3.5 inches. And it seems like just from this testimony that the argument about, it's not necessarily like, oh, well, he had a blade at a track meet, and most people have said that they don't think that a blade should be at a track meet. It's more a question of, well, it's not really illegal to have it in his bag.
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. But the thing about it, Chris, and we talked about this previously, it was never addressed as to why it was there. I mean, they could have thrown out, maybe he liked to camp. Maybe he had a job outside of work to where, he lawfully had a knife on him. They did not even address that, which I thought was a major loss for the defense. Tell us why this knife was there. We know he used it. We know he made a terrible mistake and it ended in this horrible tragedy. But I felt like addressing why the knife was even there would have been, beneficial to them. But they, of course, missed that opportunity here. And, all that officer did was pretty much say it's not criminal to have a knife that's under 5.5 inches. So, again, he was only on the stand for a few minutes, Chris. I don't know how much that impacted the jury, how they're going to, take that into deliberations. But here we are. They're going to have that case tomorrow.
I know we talked early on in the state's case, and there was some very emotional testimony, it seems, when the state was presenting their case. I mean, to just think of the body cam video that was shown, the 911 calls that were made. I know you were sitting behind Austin Metcalf's family, his father, but you also saw some emotion on the jury early on in this trial. How did it seem the jury was doing today, and really even since Saturday when we talked, when you think about just how the defense presented their case, like what type of impact did it appear? And I know it can be subjective when we talk about body language and what's actually going on in someone's mind, but what did it appear that the jury, how they were taking in the defense's case?
So, Chris, we haven't really seen much, visible emotion from the jury since when we talked previously, when they were, seeing the body cam. They weren't even that emotional, or at least I expect them to be more emotional when they saw photos of Austin Metcalf on the autopsy table. They saw 2 photos of him on the table. Then they saw 2 photos of his heart actually removed from his body as the medical examiner was explaining, the injuries and the severity of those injuries. But since then, they've just been very focused. It seems like they're laser focused on everything that the prosecution and the defense are presenting. Both narratives, no matter what the narrative is on either side, they're really laser focused. Like I look at them, I look across the courtroom to see, what the vibe is among, what the aura is, the atmosphere within the courtroom. But since then, for the past couple of days, Chris, they've just been very honed in, very serious, very stoic, just taking all the information in, which rightfully so, because, I mean, this is a child's liberty at stake here, of course. Of course, we have a victim here that's no longer coming back. We have, again, a 17-year-old's liberty here at stake, a sad thing all around. So they want to take all the information in to make the most educated, fair decision that they possibly can, of course.
And I know you talked about just how stoic Karmelo Anthony seemed, that his family seemed throughout the entire trial. Just as his family was going back into the courtroom, was there any sense of emotion that you got from his family, maybe today in the courtroom as well?
I did not, Chris. It's been the same story for the past 4 days. Today's day 4 of testimony, and again, very serious, very stoic. It's of course, it's a grave situation that they're dealing with. Their son could go away forever. I mean, Karmelo was a son. Karmelo was a brother. That's their son. That he has loved ones as well. And, they're taking in all these, these allegations against him just as in real time. So, but I'm looking over at them as they're walking back in that courtroom, and they were just also very serious walking back in. I looked at them when we finally got back in after that hour and 45-minute break, still sitting over there, father's arm around the mother, just, taking it all in. And then the defense, of course, rested, and then everyone left. We went back in for maybe a collective 5 minutes. So I'm sure, they're dealing with the gravity of what's really going on. Again, like you said, subjective. We don't know what's going on in people's minds. I'm sure there's all kinds of mental gymnastics going through their minds as well that may not be presenting outwardly. But again, they're sitting there just stone-faced, just taking it all in like everyone else.
Yeah, and we'll see what the closing arguments are, for the defense, how they really present his side to the story, even though he won't be testifying himself. One thing I was thinking of today, just kind of like going through the notes, is just how many people on the state side of it bluntly said in court that they did not believe that this was self-defense. And then you look at some of the defense witnesses, and I didn't get a sense of even people who had testified that, they saw commotion and all of this, and maybe they even witnessed this push and thought it was a forceful push from Austin Metcalf. I don't know if there was ever a witness and that looked to the jury and kind of similarly on the defense's side said that they believed that this was self-defense.
No, there's not one. 100% of these student eyewitnesses all said, that one, they didn't think anything was going to happen. Two, all of them said the prosecutions, and actually, oddly enough, Chris, one of the witnesses on Saturday, one of the defense's witnesses, also said they felt Karmelo was in the wrong. And the thing about that witness, Chris, they got up there, they put him on the stand, and the defense attorney said, you know, we haven't talked before. We only talked for 2 minutes outside here in this hallway before you got on. And that was interesting to me because, you know, there's a lot of that goes into witness preparation, you know, especially with a trial as high magnitude and tension as this one.
Right.
So I thought that was very peculiar. And then so they walk through the situation and then the prosecution comes up there and the prosecutor's like, so we've talked more than 2 minutes. In fact, I was texting your father last night. So this would have been last Friday night. So it was odd to me that it seemed as if the prosecution had a better relationship with one of the defense's witnesses. And then that witness, defense's witness, again, said that he still believed that Karmelo was in the wrong. This is in Saturday's testimony. So I haven't heard any.
And this is what I mean by preparation. The defense team preparation was lackluster because there's no way that their first time talking to the witness was literally 5 minutes prior to him walking inside and having to testify on stand. Like, there's no way. There's no way. And so I think there's something else going on here. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on.
Testimony from any of these students there so far that, you know, spoke in favor of Karmelo, which is, you know, I expected going into this, you know, maybe half and half. Maybe 5 or 6 would say, yeah, you know, Karmelo was being an instigator. And then another couple would say, you know, Austin was being an instigator, which there have been some that said both of them, you know, frustrations were rising. We know how young boys get with the hormones and competitive sports and all that. So we've had some of that too, but no one's really said that this was self-defense. All of them have said that they don't see it as self-defense.
And I wonder too, because there was this, you know, the tent culture. I mean, we've learned over the last 4 days a lot about how track meets work in Texas. And, you know, the defense has people who say, like, it's okay to go under a tent. And then you have the prosecution, which said, you know, at track meets, it's really uncommon for an athlete to go under another team's tent. And then you have, it seems like there was a variety of answers when it comes to how strong the push was from Austin Metcalf. But then it feels like we get to that point where this stabbing took place, and it didn't seem like for the defense either that we really had a witness that was able to look and exactly see what happened kind of within that moment. That may be what matters more than anything else in this entire trial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing about it, Chris, that moment, all of the witnesses said it happened so fast. They saw, you know, scuffles going on, but they took it as, nothing's not going to happen. If anything, you know, Austin will push him and he'll push him back. And then before they knew it, they didn't know somebody was stabbed until Austin lifted up his shirt and they described it as a hole in his chest. Wow. So, I mean, they might not have seen the moment. It seems like the way they describe it was in the blink of an eye. But all of them have described it as, you know, something was going on, you know, emotions were running high, but, you know, they said they weren't really scared. You know, they've seen, you know, boys talk trash to each other before. They've seen this kind of, you know, competitive nature come out. And then all of a sudden, you know, this horrendous act happens that takes the life of Austin Metcalf. So, and it happened just like that. It's by the way they testified. So maybe they just didn't see it, Chris. But, you know, there's nothing there that, again, from witness testimony that pointed toward that this was actually self-defense based on their accounts.
Yeah, and I just think, too, of how chaotic this moment was, because, you know, for us in hindsight, we can break down, and that's what this trial is about, like breaking down every step of what led up to this happening and what happened after it, with Karmelo allegedly throwing the knife and running away. And then, you know, the question of whether or not this was all self-defense. But it just seems like from the variety of accounts from both state and defense witnesses about what happened, it just speaks to how chaotic all of this was, because it just happened so quickly. Not to put you on the spot, but I just think of these jurors now. And when they get into that jury room, they're going to be going through what they heard, you know, these 27 total witnesses that they heard from both sides over the past 4 days. Yeah. Like, as you kind of think back to what you took in over the past 4 days, like, what are some of the big moments that stand out to you that the jury might have at their front of mind?
Chris, the moment that still stands out to me was from day one. I believe we talked about it a few days ago, and that's when I saw the jury get emotional, is when that coach that testified, who was also a 14-year Iraq veteran, who has seen carnage, who has seen death and did 3 tours in Iraq. He was a coach, and he was one of the ones that, you know, ran over and took his jacket off and started, you know, doing the compressions and putting pressure on the wound. And, he was on the ground doing the compressions. We had another coach on the phone calling 911, to which they played that 911 call. But that coach, that was the veteran, said he's heard the death rattle before. When somebody stops breathing and then their life or their body does one last-ditch effort to bring oxygen to their brain to try to save their life. And that's what we've heard, on shows and movies and stuff as the death rattle. It's a different kind of breath, your last breaths. And so he said that Austin was not breathing anymore. The coach on the phone is telling 911 that. And then you hear in the 911 call, that coach on the phone says, "Oh, he's breathing again, he's breathing again." But then the coach on the stand was saying, me being the war veteran, have seen people die before. I knew those were those types of last breaths, but I just didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin, the hope that was surrounding. Because of course it was a bad thing, but they wanted this kid to live, his friends and the coaches around him. But that was the most emotionally impactful thing. And that's when he gave that testimony. They played the 911 call, and that's when I looked up and saw the jury, a few of them wiping some tears from the eyes with their Kleenex. So I'm sure they're going to take that into consideration. Obviously, pulling at the heartstrings when they go back into those deliberations as they, weigh the facts of this, but there's the human part of it as well.
Yeah, and as they walk through it, I think that there's still that question of, a knife and a fist fight. And when it comes to self-defense laws in Texas, it appears difficult to, if you're the one who has the weapon, to argue self-defense. But we'll see in a closing argument what Karmelo's attorney is able to do in presenting his case. Last one for you, Cody. And I know Austin Metcalf's family has been in the courtroom throughout this trial. His dad was someone who did some very emotional interviews. You can't imagine what that family has been going through. And then even you had the medical examiner, I think on Saturday, last time we talked, who just kind of urged the family to get out of the courtroom because that was going to be incredibly graphic testimony. Was the Metcalf family there today? Like, what did you take away from just how they're doing now, day 4, after hearing all of this incredibly emotional testimony?
It's kind of the same old story, Chris. They're sitting there, and it was less emotional today because there wasn't much they haven't heard already. There were still moments where Jeff would, put his head down and just kind of, shake his head a little bit, hearing, about the last moments of his son. But today was a little less emotional because not as many witnesses, not as much, gruesome testimony about, with the medical examiner. They weren't in the room for the medical examiner testimony as well. The prosecutor advised that they leave the room, which they did. But same vibe here today, Chris. They're sitting there taking it all in. Of course, arms are around each other. I'm sure, obviously a very emotional time for them. So we'll see how it plays out once those closing arguments get underway tomorrow morning.
And they'll get underway tomorrow morning, and then we'll wait to see what the jury decides. Court TV's Cody Thomas, who has been in the courtroom for the Karmelo Anthony murder trial through the 4 days of testimony. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, Chris. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Closing arguments will begin tomorrow morning, and then we will wait for the 12 people of this jury to make a decision, and we will follow it every step of the way. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify.
You guys, oh my gosh, that was crazy, man. We're going to watch the closing arguments tomorrow. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, before I leave off, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We need more intellects like you to join the home team. Also, don't forget to like and comment down below too, because I love you guys' thoughts. Other than that, you guys have a great one, and the Fiscal Intellect is out.